welcome back to another episode of the Do You Remember podcast. My name is Adam Anwar. I am your host, and today I'm joined by stand-up comedian Jack Vincent.
Hey!
And today, me and Jack, I cut you off there. Sorry, mate. That's not a great start from me. But today, we're going to be talking about Harry Potter 2, The Chamber of Secrets. So for the people who might not know, can you give us a brief synopsis of what The Chamber of Secrets is?
Of course, yep. I just not my mate, but yep. So there's this kid, Harry Potter, and he goes to this school, and in this school, there's a chamber full of some secrets. That's
there you go.
There you go. That's the most you're gonna get. That's the podcast. It's done. That's to be done. So we can cut there. There you go. Done.
Yeah, nice. If you've enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and give us a comment. But yeah, so when was it like? Because I know that you're a big Harry Potter fan, and we'll get to that more and more as we dive into this podcast. But when was the first time that you remember hearing about Harry Potter?
Okay, so if are we talking Harry Potter as a whole franchise? So we're talking the books and stuff. Yeah, right. Okay. So the first time I'd heard about Harry Potter, there's two instances that I remember at the earliest memories I have, and they both happened in the same year at school. Okay, so the first one, we did a quiz I remember in year 4, and it was like a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire style type quiz, and I got picked, and rather than playing for money, we were playing for chocolate. And the question that exactly, it was a crunchy bar, this question as well. And this was I can't remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but there was always that question, because you always got 2 safety levels, didn't you? There were is it 1,000, and then was it 16 or 32,000 or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
This was the 32,000 question, so I would have been on a lifeline at this point. And the question was, because if you always remember as well, I don't know if anyone remembers, but the books of Harry Potter have Harry Potter in giant letters, and then the smaller text is which book it is.
Yeah.
And the question was, who wrote the Harry Potter books? And my answer was, well, I thought Harry Potter wrote them. I thought he was the author. So I was screwed. So I got the answer wrong and lost, and I got ridiculed because obviously I got it wrong and didn't get I got 1 chocolate bar rather than 32. I was well annoyed. So that's when I first was aware of it as a franchise. And then that summer, every Friday we'd go to school library, and we were all allowed to take a book home. And they were all on dots depending on your reading level. And just before summer holidays, I'd graduated from a green dot to a red dot, and I was very proud of myself, which meant I was allowed to read better books or higher skilled books. And as a kid, and probably still now, I was obsessed with dragons. I loved dragons. And Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire obviously has a giant fucking dragon on it.
Yep.
So I took this book, but it was the summer holidays. So I had this book, the school's only copy of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which at the time was rather new. I had the school's only copy, and I took it home for the whole of summer. But I was a child. I didn't read it. I just looked at the dragon on it because I was like, it's a fucking sick dragon. And I just remember all my friends, and how was it? It's such a good book in it. I was like, I didn't read it. Screw that. But yeah, I didn't read it at all. And it wasn't until a little bit later that then when the films started to kind of come out that I then dipped into the books. But it was them two were my first awareness of them. I think I read the first, no, I saw the first film, then read all the books, and then got into all the films. But I remember I was the one who used to go to midnight showings of the final films. I'm going to be that guy. Don't worry about it.
That is some dedication. To be honest, I've always wanted to do it for some film, and I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, and in my mind I always think I want to go to a midnight showing of Star Wars one year, and I just want to experience it for some mega film that has a huge fandom.
I've done it for Harry Potter. I did it for the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2. And I've also done it for Infinity War, Avengers Infinity War. Now,
how would you rate that as an experience compared to a regular cinema experience for people who might not have done it?
Now, there's 2 different things. The Harry Potter one, it was a really nice experience in the sense, because I went with a group of friends and we were all fans. They weren't as die-hard fans as I was, and it was more of a case of That wasn't that enjoyable because when you're leaving and it's nearly 3 a.m. and the
Yeah.
people aren't as buzzed as you and like, oh, I just want to go home. I just want to just leave me alone and go home. Whereas you're coming out going, I want to talk. I want to talk about this scene. I want to do that. Whereas when I went to go see Avengers Infinity War, I was that nerd who actually went by myself. And
Right.
I literally, you know how like in a cinema you have like A1, A2, A3. I literally booked A1. I was the one little guy in the corner all by myself. But it was a sold out show, so there was loads of people around me. And the people who were around me, now directly around me, they were annoying as fuck.
Yeah.
They did my tits in. But as a whole experience, because we were all diehard fans, brilliant. Because there were certain scenes that were happening, we were all gasping together. We were all enjoying the scenes together. So I think it depends on the film, and it also depends on those around you. If you go in as someone who's quite casual to watching it, don't bother. Just go at 10 o'clock when the cinema reopens the next day, because it's not worth staying up for. But for me, as well as being a Harry Potter head, I'm a huge Marvel head. So for me, that feeling of being around other nerds was brilliant.
To be honest, I do know I understand what you mean completely, because I'm a huge wrestling fan and I've been to WrestleMania in America a few times, and it's the same thing. Like, you'll go there and all week, no matter what city it's in, you're surrounded by wrestling fans all week, and and it's that feeling of being like around like-minded people constantly, wherever you go in. Like, so I completely understand what you mean. Like, just to be in one place and surrounded by it.
For a couple of, not this year, I don't know if it was not this year, because obviously the pandemic, and not last year, but for 2 years before, there's a convention in London called Heroes and Villains Fan Fest.
Oh yeah.
And it's all, do you know, like the Flash, Arrow TV shows?
Yeah.
It's basically all of the actors, but just specifically for them TV shows.
Right. Okay.
And they come down and do loads of panels. So it's not people like Chris Hemsworth and all that. It's not. It's the TV ones who come down to London.
Yes, it's Stephen Amell, isn't it?
Stephen Amell. He's actually one of the actors who. Actors. He's obviously an actor. He's one of the organisers of the actual event,
right, okay.
because actually, weird link. He's actually into wrestling.
He is. That's how I know he is.
Yeah, he's massively into his wrestling. Because I think this is how much I'm not into wrestling. Didn't he actually wrestle as Green Arrow?
He did.
Yeah,
I was there for that. It was
no way.
SummerSlam in Brooklyn in about 2016, maybe. I think he had a tag team match, if I remember correctly. My memory's a bit vague on it, but yeah. He had a match, because he's good friends with one of the wrestlers, Cody Rhodes, who now he's left, and that's a long story, but that's for a different podcast, I suppose.
But anyway, because this is not really about Harry Potter, but the thing is about these sort of fan fest things, though, is even though the panels were nothing to do with like Harry Potter or all these other franchises and kind of communities, there's a lot of kind of stalls where you can buy like little trinkets and clothes and stuff like that, and that's honestly where a lot of the money is. And it's like you can get little things. Like one of the things that I bought was like a visitor. Do you know when you go somewhere and they give you like a visitor pass so no one disturbs you? I've got one of them, but it's for Jurassic Park.
All right, okay.
And it's little things like that. But when you're walking around, you're seeing people in Hogwarts costumes, and you're seeing all these people, and you start feeling like you're actually kind of part of someone where you can actually just sit there and talk about stuff for so long, and no one go, all right, Jack, just shut up now. Like, give it a breath. So it is. I think that's one of the things, especially about midnight showings and big franchises like Harry Potter, is part of the community as well.
On the same topic, then, have you been to Harry Potter Land or whatever it's called in Watford?
I'm going to be honest, no, but I have tickets. We had tickets when obviously the pandemic's happened, we were gonna. So it is at the moment we delayed until December, because they are back open now. But some of the exhibits have been obviously kind of they're not open because of the current situation. So we're going to play it by here because it's quite an expensive thing, and we want to experience it all. And if it's something that we can experience, then we're going to go down. If it's not, we might delay it a little bit later. But no, however, during all of the hype of Harry Potter when it was all coming out, I actually lived in London.
Oh, did you?
I actually lived in London, so believe me, every time I went to King's Cross, platform 9 3/4, because they actually have, obviously in King's Cross now, they've got the fake 9 3/4.
Yeah.
That wasn't there then because it wasn't a big thing. But I remember being so happy as a kid that my train to Leeds was on platform 9, and I was such a happy little kid. I'm not going to lie. But no, I've not actually been to the Harry Potter world yet. It is on the to-do list.
Oh, you'll love it, and yeah, don't rush it. Like, do it when you think it's the right time to go, and you can go see, like, get the most bang for your buck. Because I went, and like, I'm a few years departed from a huge Harry Potter fandom, but I still really enjoyed it myself. But I thought that's going to be a perfect place for you to go, wanting to be surrounded by like all the people of the fandom. So let's flick it back. I don't know what I was trying to say there. Let's throw it back. There we go. Let's throw it back to when you first saw was it because you said it was the film that you saw first, wasn't it?
Yes.
The major film. So what's your first impressions now, sitting down and seeing this film for the first time, Harry Potter? What's your first impression?
I was 9 when it came out, and for me, I was 9-year-old watching it, and it was an overwhelming sensation because it was someone who was very similar to my age going on this adventure and enjoying this time. Now, I'll be honest with you, and I will probably I'm gonna just give a bit of spoiler to what my opinion is here. Harry Potter, the character, total twat. Hate him. He's an absolute dick, right? Team Ron Weasley all the way. So when you're a small 9-year-old ginger kid and you see a small ginger kid on the screen, a fucking wand, fucking defeating and doing all this shit, you feel fucking empowered. That's what you want to see. So for me, that was a big thing. And I thought as well, British representation of the actors, and as well, it was one of the first times where I was like the Privet Drive set. You're actually watching someone and you could be in the car and you could see a set like that. Right.
Yeah.
So when you're watching like another film and it's obviously Americanized, as someone from Britain watching it, you're like, is that how people live? I don't know. But this time we could actually see it. It was so exciting for me because it was somewhere where I was actually getting in. Because I think as well, when you're a kid, like you mentioned Star Wars earlier. Now for me, I'll go to cinema and watch Star Wars. I'll enjoy it. But I only ever got into Star Wars because my dad did. So for me, Star Wars is always kind of our franchise, our thing. Whereas Harry Potter was mine. It was something that I was getting myself into. So it was exciting for me. It was something that I was seeing myself, and you watching it with kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you when it's ending, you wanting to watch the next one, and which is why I at the time I was starting to be getting into kind of reading and stuff like that, and that's when I was like, right, I want to now go and read what did he get up to next, and that's where it took up from there. So it was a spark of something for me.
That's really interesting because representation is really key when it comes to the medium. Like seeing people who look like you and are like you on the screen. So, like you said, a ginger kid and British kids in general, being able to relate to that, and it is very, very important.
I think it is important, and the thing that I'd like to make very, very clear as well is, I think the thing about representation, and at the moment, especially at the moment, I'm very aware that I'm a straight white guy who I'm represented absolutely everywhere, and I think there is some limitations within the Harry Potter franchise where some people aren't represented. I completely appreciate that. For me, especially as a kid at the time, it was something that, because you get the odd comment when you're at school about being a ginger kid, and it was someone who was, now I was seeing a ginger person in this, and I know it's not like you said, because there are there are people who need to be represented a lot more than myself, but as a 9-year-old, it was something that sparked something for me as well. It was something that sparked me able to start wanting to read. I'm an English student now, so I know it's like 20 years later. I'm not saying that Harry Potter is the reason why I'm getting myself in 40 grand of debt. If he's happy to take the payments, that's fine by me. But it is something that when I was younger, it was nice to see. It was nice to see in a great big Hollywood film, in air quotes. It was nice to see kind of the British representation, the British talent. Again, Rupert Grint, who played Ron Weasley, the ginger kid. It was nice to see that. And the representation, yes, needs a little bit better in most franchises, but it was nice just to kind of put yourself in that little kid's body for one day.
Definitely, especially with I won't go over it too much because I went on it a lot when I did the first episode with Ruska on Philosopher's Stone. But yeah, to be able to like see someone on screen that you can really relate to, and then I mentioned how like Harry Potter It was really escapism for me because I came from like a poor council estate, and Harry Potter's he's in this even more poor situation where he's living in a middle class household, but he's living under the stairs, and like he's got no money for anything and nothing like that. And then all of a sudden, one day, he's finding out that no, you're not just this like kid who's got nothing going for him. You are this legend in this other better world that other people don't know about, and now you're being introduced to that world, and everyone loves you there, and you're going to be naturally good at everything. It was really like, oh wow, like I wish I was like Harry Potter. I wish I had that situation where an owl would fly through the window and I would get a letter saying, oh, you go into such and such a place.
I think it is as well because, like you said, I mean, you're the same as me. As we, a council estate kid, you didn't exactly have the money there, but you also kind of had a very similar life. I'm assuming. You probably around going, no, Jack, it was horrible. But a bit more for me personally, a bit more like the Ron side of things, where you didn't have all the money, but you had the love, which Harry didn't.
Yeah.
So it was a case you came from a loving household, and then when you then kind of put yourself in Harry's perspective, he doesn't have that love, but then you're seeing him kind of, especially over the course of the films and the books, he's getting himself away from that. It's all about, like you said, escapism. He's not only getting himself into a magical world, he's getting himself from out of a lovely, because he was about 11 years old. And if you think about that, 11 years being treated the way that he was, to then find himself a group of friends. I mean, he was basically adopted by the Weasley family. To then have that love that he then it's great. It's fantastic. And I still say he's a dick because later in the films he was a dick, but it's escapism, and it basically for me, Harry Potter was always that film and then books that when you turned it off and you went to bed, you always listened out for an owl to knock at your window. You always were like, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And then it never did, but you always wanted it to. That's how I always used to feel, especially as a kid anyway.
Very good point. So without any further ado, let's just dive into the film, shall we? We mentioned Harry Potter is in this kind of loveless family, and this is where we start off the second film. He's back with the Dursleys.
Back in with the Dursleys after we've obviously
through it.
So the thing that I always like about the first 3 Harry Potter films is that the Dursleys are only ever at the beginning. That's the only reason why they're there. Even though there's especially the parents are some of the biggest paid actors ever, they're only there for like 4 scenes. But yeah, we're starting back with them. But this is, and to be fair, because I know one of the major reasons why anyone likes Chamber of Secrets is the part of the love of it is because this is where we get introduced to Dobby the Elf.
Yes, that was a big note that I put. Is we meet House Elf Dobby,
and
like he's got all Harry's letters. He's a bit miserable, isn't he, at the start of the film? He says, like, oh, my friends aren't really writing to me. They've not written me all summer. And then, because this is the first book that I ever read of my own volition, was this book. And I remember at the start of this book being, like, a bit gutted reading that. I was like, what? Like, because I'd just seen the film. I'd seen film number 1, and then I read this book, and I was like, this makes no sense. Why is Hermione and Ron not writing to him? And then you find out that this house elf has got it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I hate this house elf. And then when you see it on screen and when you start to read about it more in the book, you start to fall in love with Dobby a bit more.
You do as well. I think from a cinematic point of view as well, it was a really... Because obviously, this film came out. I mean, the actual film came out 2002, so 18 years ago. Now, don't get me wrong, we're still in the 2000s there, so CGI was a thing, but it wasn't what it is today. So it was a big venture for them, and they made someone who, in actual fact, was doing things that wasn't really that great. Like he had great intentions. Obviously, he didn't want Harry to get hurt, which is fantastic. But he wasn't doing it great, especially for a 12-year. I mean, you remember being a 12-year-old kid. If your friends were ignoring you, you were going to be gutted.
That's the end of the world, yeah.
End of the world. If no one replied to that in that group chat, God Jesus. So it was heartbreaking to see. But then when they made him when you actually physically saw him, you understood why. You made him a really lovable character, and especially because of the revenge he then takes on the Dursleys in the fact that he pies them. It makes him even more lovable. And I think it was a really good opening scene for that. And then the kind of the escape that they then have in the iconic flying car. Because I think as if I ever think, I know we're going to go through kind of the breakdown of the actual film, but if you ever think of the Chamber of Secrets, for me, it's Dobby the elf, giant fucking snake, flying car.
Yeah.
They're the three things for me.
100%. And I really like the way that this like opening scene was kind of put together, because Vernon Dursley, he's got this he's got his boss and his boss's wife coming round, hasn't he? And then it's this huge moment for the family. But he's just such a bastard still. He's like, Harry, go lock yourself in that room. Don't have anything to do with it. I'm just like, this is such an easy chance to like make him a redeeming character, but she doesn't. J.K. Rowling makes him an absolute bastard of a character, which makes you just love Harry Potter as a character so much more. And for me, anyway, really root for him in this instance.
Yeah, I think as well. Like, I think for me, when you have the opening scene with the Dursley in the first one, where it's obviously Harry, it's the birthday party, and you see him basically get nothing, and his cousin's there having to get loads. I agree with you. I preferred this one because this one was the one where you've basically had 12 years of treating me like crap. This is a position where you could treat me like a golden boy, and you haven't. Here's my revenge. And in all fairness, they're very aware that Harry's part of the magical world. They're very aware of this. So he could fully explain what happened, and he fucking doesn't. He's like, I took the cake. He doesn't obviously say them words, but he owns that and fucks off in a fucking giant flying Ford Angular, and I fucking love it. Because he's like, fuck off. No, I'm done. I'm done with yous.
It's such a great moment as well, isn't it? Like where the Weasleys turn up in the flying car. They rip the metal bars off the window and they fly off of him. Again, this is something that like, it just showed the bastardness of Vernon. It's like, as Harry Potter's flying away, he's like, no, come back. Because he doesn't want him. So why does he want him to come back? He wants him to come back just so he can punish him even more and not let him have access to this fantastic world that he's about to have access to.
Yeah, and I think it's I think for me as well, because they're escaping in the actual flying car, for me, bear in mind, I'd like to point out that I've studied film and I'm also in English, so I always look at things completely far too much. I'll say some things and people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? For me, the idea of Harry escaping in a flying car is a perfect metaphor for who he is, because it's such in the terms of the book, a muggle item, a car.
Yeah.
But it's flying, which is magical. It's the combination of what he is, because he was obviously a half-blood, to then fly away from that and to fly away from his muggle life. Because he spent the whole summer flying, being a muggle. He's now flying away with the people who he thought were ignoring him. And he's now had that escape.
It's a nice transition, isn't it? And hey, that's why we've got you on, Jack, to give us that gold, because I studied film as well, but I never thought of it that way. So I mean, that is why you are here, and I'm not just here talking to myself, because I would have never come up with that, and this would be a far worse podcast. But yeah, they fly off. They get to the Weasley house, and I love the clock where like it's not a time clock; it just shows like where they all are. I really like that.
That's such a mum thing, though. It's such a mum thing, because as well, I think at this point, in this one, this is the first time that we'd met the Weasley dad. We hadn't met we'd met obviously the Weasley mum, who single-handedly is one of the best TV and film mums of all time. So when you're looking around the house at these things, because I think as well when they're getting in, the pots are cleaning themselves, the bread's cutting itself, and I don't know about you, and I hate to be gender stereotypes here, but that's what your mum's doing, and she would be doing that all at once if she could. She'd be doing every single chore that she could at once if she could. She'd be keeping an eye on the kids. So when you're looking around that house, you're looking at, she's going around every single bit at one time. And I fucking love that clock. And even in my head now, that is such an iconic little thing where you can see the clock going across. I think it's brilliant.
It's very Black Mirror as well. Now I think about it, the knowing where your kids are at all times. Have you seen that episode of the app where like she's always tracking her? Or is it like a camera in the eye? I can't remember, but yeah. So yeah, then we start to see like Ginny Weasley again. She like runs downstairs like, "Mum, where's my whatever she's asking for?" And then she sees Harry, and then she gets all shy and runs away. That's kind of planting the seeds for later on.
Yes.
And again, this is another one of the reasons why I think where I kind of agree with that Harry's a bit of a bastard, is that like he always gets his own way. Like he doesn't just like when he meets Ron, the film one before. He buys all the treats on the train, and then like now he's about to take his sister from him as well. Like he's just always going to get his way over Ron.
He does. I think for me personally, well, first of all, I'm Team Ron away just based on the hair color.
Yeah.
But for me as a character, I'm actually quite forgiving of Harry, probably for the first 3-ish films, because he's an 11-year-old who, in today's world, and if you think about it in sort of thing, he's nobody. He's basically living the Hannah Montana life. Like he's literally just been thrust upon all this fame that he didn't know he had. He's got a whole society who idolize him, and he doesn't know how to do it. But he's 11 years old and he's dealing with it. For me, in these things, I'm all right with Harry. It's when he gets older and he knows he has this fame and he starts to be a cock with it. And that's when I start disliking him, because as well, it's in the first kind of year at Hogwarts and the second, he's basically, I mean, in all fairness, especially in what's happening, he'd be dead if it wasn't for Hermione.Id be fucking dead.
Yeah.
But later on in the films, when they're starting to go to these big battles and to save Ciri and all the order and stuff like that, and I was like, I'll do it my own, and they was like, no, we'll come help you. It's like, no, you won't. I'm like, dude, you'd be dead. Just let them fucking help you. So even though I think Harry's a complete twat, I'm all right with him in these films. But I do agree, dude, he's going to take your sister. Just wait out for that.
Definitely, 100%, and not just his sister. Like the parents are kind of fawning over Harry Potter a little bit. They start like, "Oh, who's this? Harry Potter? Oh, are you really?" Like they're getting really excited about the idea of having Harry Potter around the house.
Yeah, exactly. Like he basically. A lot of the film is and the books is putting that Ron is sat in Harry's shadow but not knowing about it, and I think it's definitely put in these situations where, like you said, Harry's at his house and he's basically being idolized by his own dad, but he's sat there, and in all fairness, there's about 8 of them. He's just sat as another ginger kid at the table, but now his dad's fawning over Harry Potter. It's planting them seeds now.
Exactly, and then the next there's basically that day, isn't it? They end up going to Diagon Alley via the
Diagon Alley or Diagon Alley, as Harry fucks it all up.
This is the thing, This is the thing that really annoyed me about that, is that like you have to say the exact thing, otherwise you could end up anywhere when you go through the chimney. Which fair enough, but like he said, Diagon Alley. He didn't end up in Diagon Alley. He just ended up one street away from Diagon Alley. So
I got that. I was a bit like, that's narratively very convenient that they just happen to drop him at the next alley.
Yeah.
Like, it's apparently the actual flu network that they're all going through is all over the country, but he just happens to missay it, so happens the next one. That don't work. Like, if I get your number wrong, Adam, I'm going to be ringing someone like in Suffolk. Like,
you're not going to be ringing my brother.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just happened conveniently. Yeah, I was a bit like with that one, but I'll accept it because it's how they worked it. But I was very much like you in the sense of that doesn't logistically work. But my issue is, and this is just side note of any time that any magic's involved, I think about things far too much, and I'll go logistically that don't work, and the answer is it's magic.
Yeah. And it's a children's book, so I suppose we don't need to
we'll give them that.
Too hard on it, And so when they go to Diagon Alley, they end up going to the bookshop, and we meet Gilderoy Lockhart for the first time, but we also meet, I think for the first time, Malfoy's dad.
Good old Lucius, who, as someone who has very little of it, great hair.
Yep,
I won't lie.
I agree, and I can agree on both points there, because I'm losing mine as well, so...
Yeah, like I said, I actually really like the Malfoy family in the sense of I think they're really good. I don't want to get too political, but I think they're the embodiment of the Tories, and I think they're the embodiment of the rich and the poor, especially with the Weasleys. And I think they're really good villains. But I think obviously as they start turning into anti-heroes, but at this point they're big villains. And as I said, I'm a really big Dobby fan. I'm a really great I hate you, Malfoy, because obviously what happens later on, but we'll get to that bit. But yes, this is the first time that we're going to be meeting Lockhart and Lucius Malfoy.
And I completely agree. Lucius Malfoy is such a great bad guy character, and he's like a demi-boss, isn't he, on a computer game? Like he's like one of the big bosses that you fight before the end boss, and you like you spend ages like trying to beat him, and then like, oh fuck's sake, now I've got to face the proper boss, and you think you've done it. And he is a great one of those where like he's such a good bastard, but he's not even the main bastard.
Yeah, exactly. He's an absolute bastard, and he's one of the better bastards in the whole franchise.
100%.
But when you're dealing obviously with the Dark Lord, he obviously can't be the biggest bad. What I also think is a really good thing as his story develops is when he basically becomes a little bitch. Is you're literally like, oh, you are a little bitch. You actually start to realize, oh, okay. And that's when you, like I said, I think that's the metaphor you use as as the demi boss. I was like, I can see it. Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's a good half a boss. I like it.
It's a typical bully syndrome as well. Like, you're going to bully the people who are below you. So, like, you feel like the Weasley family are poorer than you. You feel like the kids, so you can bully them. But then as soon as the bigger bully, Voldemort's involved, then you're going to really bottle it and shy away and show that you're a real coward.
Yes, exactly so. Exactly so.
Right, so we move on. Platform 9 3/4. We missed it out earlier on, but Dobby said Harry Potter must not go back to Hogwarts. And this is the moment. He goes to run through 9 3/4, and he just runs straight into the wall. Luckily, Ron's there with him, and they decide, let's take the flying car to Hogwarts. So again, another iconic scene. We see the flying car again.
We do. And what I will say, it's not a big thing, especially in the whole narrative of things, but just before we head to Platform 3/4, whilst we're in the bookshop with the Malfoy and the Weasleys, this is also where Lucius slips something to Ginny.
He does, and not
in the greatest scheme of things, you don't think about it, but it becomes very vital later on. But yeah, no. So this is a scene where Dobby fucks things up because, as much as a lovable little cretin, he's a little cretin. So he has messed things up. Harry and Ron have done exactly what any two teenage boys are going to do at the age of 12. Let's hotwire my dad's car. Which I had the very good point of. So all of his family have gone through this thing, gone to Platform 3/4. Now, I don't know about you, mate. I'm not a driver. But when I get out of a car, I take the keys with me. Why didn't his dad do that? Why does Ron have the car keys? But again, it's a kid's book. Well, I suppose we'll have to let them have it. But yeah, so they get in the iconic car. This is where, because as well, this is any big film always has like a big portion of the film that's used in the trailer, and this is it when they're obviously getting chased by the train. And this is where the book art comes from as well. And eventually they get hit by the iconic Whomping Willow, which I actually love the scene when they're actually battling it, and they basically the car, when they arrive at Hogwarts, does a fucking runner.
Yeah, the car just like bottles it and runs off on them. Like, I was always like, what's going on?
That's when you kind of start realizing as well that it's not just a flying car. The car might actually have its own emotions, which then you go, as a like a 10-year-old kid, you're like, oh, I feel a bit bad for you now. You just got beaten up by a fucking tree.
It's interesting you say that. I don't want to like go too far into comedy here, but like I was watching something on the Jerry Seinfeld earlier, and that's one of his tricks that he does, is that like he puts human emotions onto objects and stuff like that. So it's interesting that you were discussing how the car has now got human emotions, because you'd be like, oh, I mean, one of his bits, I mean, I won't go too far into it, but his bit's basically like, I wonder if horses realise that they're racing, and, you know, then he goes on and on from there. But it's interesting. And he's one of the masters, isn't he? So it's an interesting way that people do that. And it works across the board for creative writing, because obviously this isn't comedy, but this works here, where they make the car have its own feelings and kind of want to escape. But it has its heroic moment later on.
It does. I think that's as well. I know we're going through the synopsis, but I know one of the things as well that you probably want to talk about is kind of why this particular film is such appealing for me. Is the one thing I love about the Chamber of Secrets is a lot of this, and I don't mean this disgustingly, but a lot of the seed dropping that it does. Like you said, that original scene when you first properly meet Ginny, that's dropping a seed for something that doesn't come into fruition for about I think it's the 5th book. The thing with Ginny and Lucius, that's nothing until you go to the end of this film. Again, the thing with the car, up until this moment, that car hasn't really had its own emotions. And when it does then get its own emotions, it then leaves the scene. It then obviously then becomes a bit more of a character when it's needed to later on. And that's one of the things I really do like about Chamber of Secrets, as to be fair, and Harry Potter as a whole franchise, is that it does a lot of, it's a very well thought out series. There's a lot of things that are happening in books 1 and 2 that you didn't even, like, one of the things that I always remember, and this is it wasn't until I actually reread the books, I think for the second or third time or something. And I know this isn't the one that we're covering today, but I always found it amazing that Sirius Black is a character that is not introduced until the third film or the third book.
Yeah.
But he's actually mentioned in the first chapter of the series. And I was
Is
like,
he?
you know how in the first book, how Hagrid arrives on a motorbike?
Yeah.
That's Sirius Black's motorbike, and it says it in the
It
first
is,
chapter.
It is, yeah,
And
he does.
It always blows my mind that it's such a well thought out series that the character's been mentioned there, and you think it's no one, and then when they do introduce it, you don't put two and two together because it's such a throwaway comment, and that's what I like about it, and that's why these little moments you then get you get a little bit of a cheer when you find it out later. You're like, oh my god, that's what that means, and yeah. But yeah, so the cars, the Whomping Willow and the Ford Angular have had a bit of a fight, and I think as well at this point is when something that comes out throughout this book as well is Ron's wand is broken in all of this.
Yeah.
It actually snaps, which means that he then can't apparently use magic, but only when needed. Yeah.
It's such a great metaphor as well, isn't it? I mean, how Ron's kind of emasculated in front of Harry all the time, and then he's got this physical representation of a floppy wand that he tries to hold aloft, and then Harry's like, don't worry, I'll do it.
Exactly. No, that it's an emasculating thing. It's literally because if you think about it, I know that obviously it's Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. There are girls there, but it's a literal phallic object that they're carrying around. To have it snapped in half in front of your best mate, who's always better than you. I'm pretty sure as well that Harry's is bigger anyway. It's definitely more powerful because it's got his brother. It's it's metaphorical and all.
Exactly. So school starts. We've got to the point where school's starting, and like I can't remember what happens, but the first big thing that I remember happening is that Ron gets a howler from his mum, and we get introduced to the howler again. This is another great concept, that the concepts of the howler, where the letter that just shouts at you itself, and then everyone's like, "Oh no, I had one of them once," and then like he's quivering as it's going off. It's such a great scene.
Yeah, I think it's a great scene as well. It's a really good scene that in all because it tells you a lot that that could have taken scene upon scene. In that one scene, you find out the dynamic of the family between the Weasleys. You find out that Ginny is put into Gryffindor because she sat with them all. You didn't need to know that, but you did, but they didn't make a show of it that she's just there. You also find out what happened with the parents after the car, but they also introduce an element of magic and everyone loves. So it's a really iconic scene, and as well, you also find out a lot about Neville because of his reaction to it as well.
Exactly. I think doesn't he say that he had one from his grandma once or something like that?
Exactly. Neville's grandma, potentially one of the most iconic characters in the whole franchise, so I don't think we've ever fucking met.
I don't think we do, no. I don't think we do. So another big thing that happens is that Malfoy, he calls Hermione a mudblood. So again, we've been introduced to another like big concept in the film that's like really important. This concept where they basically bring racism into the film, where they start calling him a mudblood, which is like, I think it's still quite cutting for like a child's book to bring like basically to create your own racial slur and then have it used like throughout the book.
I think it's really good as well. I think it were really well done because it's teaching children about racism, and it's also teaching children about racism in the sense of how it is legitimately not needed. In the sense that they literally like Hermione. Like I even said earlier, Harry Potter would be dead if it wasn't for Hermione. She is a much better spellcaster than than them. So for her to then be put as someone below, it's teaching kids really good, really, really well. I think basically the term mudblood and that sort of element did for kids with racism and I'll always go back to this, but what X-Men did for kids and kind of homophobia in the sense of mutants with Tret, basically like gay people. Because I think even in one of the X-Men films, I think one of the kids reveals to their parents that he's a mutant, and one of the parents even says, "Have you tried not being a mutant?" Which I'm sure that a lot of people in the LGBT community have had been told to them. So I think these franchises that again are about representation are trying to help kind of bridge that gap. I think it's such a hard-hitting thing to do, but I also think it's done in such a good way that you don't actually realize you're being educated.
100%, 100%. You've hit the nail right on the head there. The next scene that I remember seeing in the film was that Harry's starting to hear voices, and the voices that he's hearing leads him and the others in the trio, Hermione and Ron, to blood on the walls, and it says the Chamber of Secrets has been opened, which again, huge moment, because I flash back to me reading it. When I read that as a kid, I'm like, wow, I need to read it. I need to read and just like blast through this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think as well, it goes back to kind of putting yourself in that situation. Is you're reading such an iconic thing, and it's written in blood, and you're a kid. I mean, I'm not being funny, but unless you got a paper cut at the age of 12, you weren't always around blood, or at least I wasn't. Actually, I got split open once. There were a lot of blood then, but anyway, there's a lot. You don't often get yourself put round that. So then to put yourself in essentially almost like a serial killer situation, it's terrifying, but it's done in a really good way that it's not overtly scary for a 12-year-old. It's kind of done safely, and it's a very powerful situation, but it's also setting things up really, really. Because I think as well, they do find the first message, and then it's afterwards that Professor McGonagall actually explains what a Chamber of Secrets is.
Yeah,
because that's it. Yes, because one of the kids asks, "What is the Chamber of Secrets?" Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think Hermione asked, which when I was watching it, I was like, that's a bit like forward, and it was a bit. I kind of felt unprofessional as it for a teacher to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna tell you this like big mysterious thing that like has real negative connotations around it. I'm gonna tell all you 12-year-olds now exactly what it is."
I remember we used to just a bit of a kind of side thing. I remember once I asked my teacher in school. There were a group of us, and we asked which teachers were dating, and we had to wait. We asked that. I remember at the start of my GCSEs, and my teacher said, "I'll tell you in your last week at school," and he did. We had to wait 2 years for it.
Yeah.
So, but weirdly enough, apparently 2 teachers had broken up and got back together in that time frame. But anyway, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's one of them things because as well, it's an educational point of view because it's the school's history. So it wouldn't be a case that it'd be a bit weird. But then on that same breath, you're basically talking about a teacher again. Going back to it, you're talking about one of the teachers of a fan of the school being pretty racist, and the school kind of just accepting that. So yeah, it is a bit like, okay, didn't think you'd want to go down that route. But no, I suppose it's one of the things as well. Is it's a bit different when you're going to school that's in a fucking castle, I suppose.
And this is when the trio come up with a plan, or should I say Hermione comes up with a plan that they're going to do the Polyjuice potion. So again, we're now introduced to the Polyjuice potion, and it's a potion that's going to turn you into whatever you put in. So if you put someone's hair in, it's going to turn you into that person.
But we've got the Polyjuice potion, but the only reason why we have it is because there's a second sign, which is mentioning the heir of Slytherin. You had the first one that then prompted them to say, "What's Chamber of Secrets?" And then the second one was the heir of Slytherin has arrived or returned.
Yes.
Which then they all suspect is Malfoy because he's the only character in the franchise who's from Slytherin who's been introduced so far. So obviously it's him because the other two don't have Crabbe and Goyle don't have 2 IQs, and at this point one of them's not done drugs in real life, so he's still in the franchise. So it's obviously got to be Malfoy. So that's when they decide it's him, and then Hermione starts making the Polyjuice potion, which is when we meet the other iconic character of the Chamber of Secrets, Moaning Myrtle, who is, if I remember rightly, is the only character in the whole of the Harry Potter films who is a student but was played by a 30-odd-year-old woman.
Was she?
Yeah, even though she's playing like a dead 17-year-old, she was played by a 37-year-old. But yeah, we meet the iconic Moaning Myrtle, who, by the way, I'd like to point out, in like book 4, I think it is, when she pops back up, tries to watch Harry naked, which is a bit weird, but if that was the other way around, that's another story, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that is a bit weird. I don't remember it because I read the books ages and ages and ages ago, back in the early noughties. But yeah, that is bizarre.
Yeah, I think it's in the film as well as a bit where, because obviously he has I mean, you're probably doing this in the next one, but he has the egg and he has to go underwater, he has to go in the baths, and she's trying to have a peak. But
yeah, that's when it is.
Yeah. It's a comic relief part. It's not done with smut, but yeah, this is where they start brewing the potion, and we meet Moaning Myrtle, which again for me is when you're meeting Moaning Myrtle, she's actually a comic relief character. You just see her as a character who's not actually needed. She's just there for a bit of comic relief. And it's only later on when the story of the Chamber of Secrets actually continues that she's actually quite vital to that. But you don't know it at this point.
Again, that's another part of the good writing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think for me, especially because like I said, I'm doing English at the moment and I'm a creative writer and I'm doing creative writing at the moment, is a lot of this when I'm writing, I'm not writing about broomsticks and wands and stuff like that, but a lot of the inspiration that I do get is from franchises like this, where when you're putting a throwaway line in chapter 1 and that reveal happens in chapter 22 of book 8 or whatever, you're like, fuck me, that's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's
100%.
what I do like. That's what I really like about, especially these earlier books of Harry Potter.
And to touch on that again, what we see next is we see the dueling scene where they're all dueling, and then we realise that Harry Potter is a parcel tongue. So go back to the beginning of book number 1 where he's at the zoo and he talks to the snake and he doesn't realise he's talking to. Well, he thinks like, wow, did I just say that snake talk? And now he realises, wow, that I can actually talk to snakes, and then we start to get a bit more into his character there, don't we?
Yeah, you start to as well. This is probably when he starts, because I think this is when he realizes his parcel tongue and he's in front of his other. No, apologies. The people around him,
they all realize. Yeah,
they realize it before him, because and as well, because going back to what I mentioned before, he's obviously spent majority of his life as a Muggle. He has no idea why that's weird. Because he's like, it's magical, you know. I got here in a flying fucking car. I bet a lot of people talk to snakes. And then it's when Hermione, and you know what? Fuck Ron at this point. Hermione, she's the best character. She turns around and she's like, no, that's fucking weird. And then obviously they start to, you know, I'm hearing voices as well, and she's like, this is also very, very weird. So yeah, this is when he starts to have his internal dilemmas about what is actually happening as well.
Yeah, because he starts to think, oh no, what if I'm the heir of Slytherin? What if I'm going to be the one who creates all this like evilness in the film, in their school?
Yes, because I think as well, is it around this time when the Quidditch match has happened, and because obviously he's in the infirmary because he breaks his arm, doesn't he? Because Gilderoy Lockhart messes it up. There's a point where he's in the infirmary and we find out Dobby's back. And he's like, "Oh, I did it all. I'm really sorry." And then it's because it's at night time when he starts to realize that he's maybe not all there.
Yeah.
So this is all kind of happening at once. Because for this kid, you've got a house elf who don't want him to return because there's an evil returning. He's hearing voices. He's starting chatting to snakes. Some guy's just fucking made his arm floppy. You're now thinking, fuck me, there's a 12-year-old. This is going for an awful lot. Maybe I am fucked in the head. Maybe I am the actual heir of Slytherin. This is where he's starting to have his own self-doubts, and he's maybe not as a golden boy as much as he thought he was.
And he's in the frame, isn't he, for all these attacks? Because he was the first one on the scene when Filch's cat earlier on, when the big the Chamber of Secrets is opened, happens. And then I think there's an attack here as well, isn't it? Somebody through nearly headless Nick sees the basilisk.
Yes, because that was also the thing as well. Because no one ever looked directly, because it was the cat who looked at the water. Someone saw them through. I can't remember who it was who saw through the actual ghost, and then and then obviously the ghost can't die twice, and then obviously because if I remember rightly, the actual first the Chamber of Secrets has been opened. No one was dead at that one. And then the cat died, and then it was the second one where, because I remember as well, the school, I thought the school should have maybe acted at the first one, but no, apparently at this point, they're like, maybe we should start sending some kids home.
Yeah.
They're like, no, I'm all right.
I think it was a cat at the first one. It was a cat at the first one. The cat was, because the cat saw it through the water. Yes,
it would have been because the Chamber of Secrets was open, because the bathroom, the water was flooded. Yes, you are right. Yeah, I'm with you now. Yeah, because and then I know because it's at the Quidditch match as well that we meet the photographer, because obviously he's someone who later on becomes again vital.
Yes, Colin Creevy, yeah.
Colin Creevy, who appears and is Harry Potter's biggest fan, and then in the films never appears ever again.
Yeah.
But yes, no, you are right. So then that's the one that happens there, because as well, if I remember rightly, there's we're now getting into the point about around Christmas time, aren't we? Because everyone goes home except him. And then when they come back, that's when they all start playing with the mandrakes.
Yeah, and then I think next is when they actually drink the polyjuice potion, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it would have been that. No, you are right. So they drink the polyjuice potion, which I think is, I mean, the actual escapades between Harry and Ron, that's a side note, that's story progression. Hermione's polyjuice potion, I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
And obviously when she turns into the cat, which I thought for a CGI as well, I think they did pretty freaking well.
Yeah, definitely. I thought they did I'm mumbling over my words here. They did a decent job doing that. But I can't remember if anything comes from it in the afterwards, but like I remember watching the film being like, they've not really achieved anything by doing the polyjuice portion, have they? They've just they went to find out if Malfoy was the heir of Slytherin, and then he wasn't, and then they went back and then they just found out that Hermione turned into half a cat.
Yeah, to be fair, it was largely not needed. For story progression, it wasn't needed. But what it actually did aid them doing was it gave the story of progression for the actual heir of Slytherin to continue with the attacks. So in actual fact, for the actual progression of them finding something out, did sweet FA except show off that this is a magical place that they live. For the actual progression of the school year and these months going ahead, it just helped them it kept the main characters preoccupied whilst the actual heir of Slytherin was going around attacking people.
And then I think this is around the time that Harry goes back to the girls' toilets and like Hermione's not there and Moaning Myrtle's saying, "Oh, come to throw something at me again, have you?" And then he finds the diary of Tom Riddle, which this is where like it starts to really pick up again.
It does, and in actual fact, I actually just remembered there actually, because I had a quick look at my notes. The only thing that they actually, with them actually speaking to Malfoy, whilst Crabbe and Goyle was using the polyjuice potion, the only thing that they actually discovered that they didn't know before was that the last time the chamber was opened, someone died.
Ah, yes, they do.
Because Malfoy told Crabbe and Goyle, in air quotes, that that's what his dad had told him.
Yeah.
However, that wasn't really required. Like they would, if someone dies, that's pretty big news. If you went in the school library, it's probably somewhere there. They didn't need to do all that to find it out, but that is when you find out that because I think as well they don't mention a name; they just say a girl died.
Yeah, they do.
So it's at this point you know that someone has died. Little do you know that you've probably already met this character.
And then,
but yeah, like you said, it's when they start finding it's the diary, the Tom Riddle's diary.
The diary of Tom Riddle, and then he goes back in time, and he's. I think does he write a question into the book, and then the book's like, "Oh, let me show you what happened."
Yes.
Then he goes back in time with the book. Then it makes sense later on because it's a Horcrux, but it doesn't make sense at the time. Like how is his book sending him back in time? How is it doing this? And then
because at the time when you're looking at it, you're just going, "It's magic." That's literally all you needed to really know about it.
Yeah.
But no, you are quite right. It's like it's a good little thing there that it's a lot bigger than you need it to be, and it's a really good story progression that when they do flashback in time and we get to see a lot of these characters. Although I don't think fucking Albus Dumbledore aged anything. He's been like everywhere. But you're seeing all these characters because at this point as well, you're meeting Tom Riddle, but you don't know who Tom Riddle is.
Yep. And that's a great part of the mystery as well, isn't it? And the reveal later on, I thought was brilliant.
It was. I mean, when we get to that bit, obviously go into more detail, but she must have thought of that name very specifically. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite parts about the flashback bit, because one of my favorite characters was in there, is Hagrid. I love Hagrid. I think he's an absolutely fantastic character. I think as well it's because of his love of animals that I actually love. So we obviously get to see a younger Hagrid here. In actual fact, because Hagrid is one of the few characters in Harry Potter who obviously is so immersed in the magical world but doesn't cast any spells.
Yeah.
You actually see him here as a young wizard, and you're seeing him be essentially he's been told something, he's been done something that he actually hasn't. So again, it's almost a bit of the reverse of Harry in the sense of he was a good person, has now been basically his name dragged through mud, whereas Harry was someone he was treated like mud and then name elevated. But yeah, you learn a lot about the first time the chamber was opened in the flashback.
And we see that Hagrid, this is why Hagrid loses his wand. And then I was like, what the fuck? This was like so long ago. I'm sure now, like, how do that back?
Yeah. You're thinking they're going like, oh, okay. So, because I think as well, up until this point, you'd never really cottoned on that he doesn't really use magic. You'd never
Yeah.
really. He's gone, oh yeah, he doesn't really, because he's sat around in the magical world, and obviously because he's a half a giant, you kind of just expect it. But then you start going, oh, he doesn't actually make any spells, and then this is kind of the reason why. And then again, we get another little seed laid here when the monster that they're accusing he's got escapes, which is his small giant spider, shall we say? Because at this point it's a baby. But obviously that's when we see him scurry away, which again lays us a nice little egg for later.
Exactly. And then not long after this, Harry loses the diary. Someone steals it from him. He has his bedroom's all ripped up and all that. Then Hermione's found petrified. She was looking around corners with the mirror because she'd realised it's a basilisk.
Team Hermione all the way.
And then Harry and Ron, they go to Hagrid's hut under the invisibility cloak. They have to hide under it, and then they start to see a lot of things happen. They see that Dumbledore steps down because Lucius Malfoy makes him, and then Hagrid does that very clunky, well, if anyone was looking for anything, I would say they should follow the spiders. Yep, that's what they should do. They should follow the spiders. And like, I mean, if I'm the guy arresting him, I'm like, I'm not fucking going to arrest you. I'm going to send you to a madhouse. What are you on about? Hey,
you're either sending him to a madhouse, or you're going to go, maybe I'll follow some spiders. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, he's not done it. He's not done it remotely discreet in the slightest. But I think as well, the spider element is a great thing because it's such a comic relief aspect because of Ron's fear of spiders. It's absolutely brilliant, absolutely fantastically brilliant. But yes, he tends them on. He's discreetly told them to go follow the spiders, which conveniently at that point there are trails of spiders in there. Hundreds. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I know I don't live in a castle and I don't live out in a hut. I don't think I've ever seen us two spiders together. So fuck knows what they're doing. But yes, there's trails of spiders which lead them into the Forbidden Forest, which is, and as they kind of get deeper and deeper into the Forbidden Forest, these spiders start to get a little bit bigger.
There we go. And this is where like the big showdown happens between Harry and Ron and the spiders. They have the conversation with Aragog and he says, no, listen, Hagrid was innocent. He never opened the Chamber of Secrets. And they're like, oh my God, Hagrid didn't do it. But anyway, now I've told you that, my kids are going to eat you. And you're like, well, what the fuck? Like, I thought we were friends. Like, nah, I'm not your friend. I'm Hagrid's friend and he's your friend. But no, that's not how things work around here. So come on, kids, tuck in. And the car comes and like saves them.
Yes. So the Ford Anglia from before has apparently spent the whole year in the forest doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because apparently cars don't need to eat, and at this very moment, it rocks back up, and they get in, and I think as well, if I remember rightly, they're with Fang, they're with Hagrid's dog.
Yeah, I think they are.
And he's a giant pussycat anyway. So yes, they escape out of the forest. Again, for its time, CGI wise, I thought it was done brilliantly, and I think Aragog for me is, when you mentioned earlier that obviously Lucius Malfoy is like the demi-boss, Aragog for me is the tutorial boss of a video game, in the sense of that you're going to go there, it's going to be difficult, but as soon as you master them controls, you'll do it in 30 seconds. And I think that's what Aragog is. It was a clincher for the film franchise. A giant spider. He's actually he's actually your friend, but in this instance is going to be your enemy because all his kids are going to fucking eat you.
Definitely. And then this is around the same time that Harry and Ron realise that the monster is a basilisk. Obviously, Hermione is always ahead of them. She's always going to know before them. And now they've realised that it's a basilisk. I don't know. Was that what was in the piece of paper that was in her hand? I can't remember.
The piece of paper, that was in her hand was, she'd written pipes onto it, which indicated how it was travelling round. But the actual piece of paper itself was like a magical book on a basilisk. So she'd indirectly given them their answer. So in all fairness, they did fuck all. She'd done all the answers and she'd led them to it. I mean, you can argue that they were smart enough to find it, but it was in her hand. She literally handed them to it. So
there you go. And then I think they're both under the invisibility cloak again. And then this is where they hear that Professor McGonagall says that, a child has been taken into the chamber. We're going to have to close the school. Yes. And they're like, oh, who is it? It's Ginny Weasley. She's the one. Yeah. Ron shits himself. Lockhart, they say, Lockhart, come on, you're going to have to do the rescue. And he's like, oh, yeah, no worries. He goes to his office. When he goes to his office, he's packing up and he's about to run away.
You find out that he's doing the old. Cause you find out he's basically he's taking credit for other people's work. So they'll do some. He'll wipe their memory, and then he'll take the credit for it, which is the birth of one of my favorite memes of all time. Because don't know if you're aware of this, but the actor Kenneth Branagh, who plays Gilderoy Lockhart, is actually the director of the first Thor film. He actually directed the Chris Hemsworth Thor film, and the meme that I read was, "I can't believe that this guy directed the Thor film," and someone put, "Or did he? Did he just take someone else's credit?" And I was like, "It's brilliant, brilliant." But yeah, he's exposed. He's exposed as as a big giant fraud.
He's a bullshit artist, isn't he?
Bullshit artist, genuinely is. Which, to be honest, it's one of these things when he's not a huge character in Chamber of Secrets for character development. He's again, I get a bit more of a story progression. He's a bit more of a comic relief character. He's not really vital to it, but you'll know it as the story is going on. I don't want to sound funny. In the first level, is my video game head on. In the first lesson the boys have with him, the kids have with him, he literally lets a classroom be cleaned up by elves, pixies, and he leaves two teenage boys to sort them out. So you've known as an audience that he's basically a giant prick, and this is where you find out he actually really is. He's just being bullshitting them. But they don't mess with Harry and Ron because they'll just take you hostage, because that's exactly what they did to Professor Lockhart. They held him hostage and took him in.
It shows how inept he is, that like Ron with his half-broken wand and Harry, this like kid who's like only been doing magic a year, they've kind of overpowered him, they've outsmarted him. And they said, no, listen, you're the hero, you're going to come with us and you're going to save Ginny Weasley. And then obviously he ends up tricking them, overpowering, takes Ron's wand, does some kind of spell, and it obviously backfires and he ends up fucked.
It basically wipes his mind. It uses the exact same spell that he's been on other people, but he's now the mind. But they before they actually do his mind wipe him, they've actually taken him into the girls' bathroom, because that's where you take everyone. When you're 12 years old. They have that mini interaction with Moaning Myrtle, where we now get it confirmed that Moaning Myrtle was the girl who died when the Chamber of Secrets opened, because I think Harry says, "How did you die?" And she literally says, "I don't remember. I just saw some eyes and then I died." So then that's kind of giving it away. They find a small snake head on one of the taps, which is an indication. Harry does his thing, which opens up the Chamber of Secrets. They're now going down, and that's when I think it's actually to get them down is when Ron mind wipes him. So they're now down into the entrance of the Chamber of Secrets.
And this is the culmination of the entire film. It starts to all happen, and we get the big battle scene. It's Potter versus the memory of Tom Riddle. Talk us through this last scene.
They're about to get into. So at this point, they found the actual entrance of the giant snake bit. That's it, because he didn't use his Parseltongue to get into this bit. He used his Parseltongue to open the actual bit. But there's an explosion, which means that Ron has to stick around with Lockhart. Harry is by himself. He's in the chamber. It's literally him, and he's now met Tom Riddle. He has no idea that Tom Riddle was anyone to worry about, because at this point Tom Riddle has just been a guide to him. He's just been a friend of his.
He's so, bless Harry, he's so trusting, isn't he? Like Aragog
he's a dick.
He just told you that Hagrid didn't do it, but Tom Riddle was the one who told you that he did it, and then you'd be like, oh, hi Tom, I'm just here to save Ginny. Yeah, everything's gonna be all right. You're gonna be on my side, aren't you? Like, just what are you doing, Harry?
Exactly. So, and also, I don't understand why he's questioning any of this, because Tom Riddle's just sat chilling next to Ginny's unconscious body. Like in Harry's head, is like, "We've got to help her." Dude, when you arrived, he was nowhere near her. Do you think he gives a shit? Like, no. And then this is where it all culminates. So he rearranges his name of Tom Riddle. No, Tom Marvolo Riddle to "I am Lord Voldemort." Because as well, up until this point, Lord Voldemort hadn't been mentioned. He hadn't really been. He'd been mentioned as a Dark
Yeah.
Lord. Because you think about it as well, he needed to be in the first film. They needed the clinch in the first book. He needed that clincher. He was a very vital point that this is going to be your big bad throughout. So when you're going into the second one, in the first one, he's seemingly defeated. Up until now, you're like, oh, he's been done. He doesn't need to come back. And then boom, I am Lord Voldemort. Voldemort's back. That's when realizations happen that Riddle's actually Slytherin's heir. He's actually Voldemort. When, because obviously it was Dumbledore who had expelled Tom Riddle all them years ago, and after all this had happened. So when Harry's like, "Yo, I'm Team Dumbledore. I'm in this," that's when Tom Riddle's like, "Right, let's sort this out." So the basilisk is removed. Which, now, if anyone's a mythological dick like I am, a basilisk isn't a giant snake. So they got that bit wrong. But I will. It's a magic. I will anyway. Big ass snake. They needed a giant snake because obviously it's Slytherin. Big ass snake and a 12-year-old boy battling it out. The spells that he's using are having no effect at all on him because it's a fucking giant snake. He's going giant. He's going on in all the pipes of under the ground. Harry does the most, I don't know, either stupid or smart thing I've ever done. He's in a because as well he's at this point he's managed. Dumbledore has twigged on because he's fucking Dumbledore and has sent Fawkes the Phoenix down with his snake.
And I never realised how important this bit was to the film until this time of watching it, because Fawkes goes down there and he blinds the basilisk. In the past, I thought he's blinded it. Okay, now he's just like going to be easier to beat. But now watching it, I was like, oh, idiot. Of course he needs to blind him, because if he looks at you with his eyes and you look in his eyes, you die. And that's why he blinded him. I never understood that before. Why did I not get it? I don't know.
And again, this is the beauty, I think, of all the films, is when you rewatch them, you pick up new little things. You're like, I didn't even notice that, of course. But so Fawkes is blinded. Fawkes flew down, dropped off the Sorting Hat, and which, by the way, Sorting Hat, one of the most undervalued characters of all time. He's Sass Queen. But on the way back, he's blinded the basilisk, so he can't kill Harry using his eyes. But he is still a 50-foot giant fucking snake. Yeah. So obviously he can still cause some damage. So now, because of this, the basilisk is now relying on hearing. So Harry's gone into one of the tubes. He's managed to distract the basilisk with a stone, because apparently pipes have stones lingering about. Harry's then managed to get himself back to the Sorting Hat, managed to pull out of the Sorting Hat the sword of Gryffindor, which... Personally,
you've always got to pull out.
You've always got to pull out. But I also did not know that the Sorting Hat came with transportation. Didn't know it had this ability just to transport items.
Come on, Jack. It's basic magic hat. It's that's what magic is.
You are right.
You put your hand in the magic hat and you get stuff out of it. That's how magic works.
You know what? I don't even know why I questioned it. You're very right on that one. You're very fucking right on that.
Yeah, but he's lucky he got a sword and not like a rabbit or something, because that would have been like
exactly
shit.
Yeah, because snakes literally eat rabbits, so you'd be screwed. But he pulls out the sword of Gryffindor, which is needed because it's the snake. It's a snake of Slytherin, and it's the sword of Gryffindor. He managed to climb onto a giant Salazar Slytherin face because there's just one happening to be in this giant tomb. And at that point, Harry's having a little bit of a battle. The actual snake, I think, he hurts him. He actually gets venom on him. Does Harry? It's not bitten to the point where he's needing an amputee, but he's been
like
bitten. It's a graze, but he's still got a bit of venom in there.
Yeah.
But in true action final scene battle, Harry delivers that final blow to kill the snake, which again, I think it's going to sound really weird. I think it's a really it's a good scene because the snake falls over like a snake would do and then obviously dies. And then when Ron and Hermione return to the chamber all them years later in the final film, the skeleton's still there, and I was like, obviously it would be, that's why they're going down there, but it's still in the same position and stuff like that. But he delivers that Fawkes, apparently, as a phoenix, has magic fucking tears. So he's cried on Harry's arm, so now Harry's back to full health. He's got that med pack that you get in all them video games because we're in the final battle now.
Yep.
Now, at this point, because that's only the snake, he's the big baddie's bodyguard. The big bad's still here, which is Tom Riddle. But Tom Riddle can't be hurt because he's a memory.
He's a ghost. Yeah,
he's a ghost. He's a ghost. He's a ghost of memory. But he has been spending all this time manipulating Ginny Weasley. So obviously, with Tom Riddle still doing what he needs to do, he's still alive. Now, at this point, this graze that had come out of Harry's hand still had a fang. That's what he took it out. Fawkes cried onto it. So he still has a basilisk fang in his hand. Now, what do you do with a memory? You destroy it. So that's what Harry does. He puts it straight through that diary. He destroys the memory of Tom Riddle by destroying the diary, which in turn destroys the memory of. It's obviously at this point he hasn't destroyed Lord Voldemort. We don't know that, but he's just destroyed, and he's also destroyed a Horcrux, which we didn't know about.
And to add insult to injury, he's killing the diary with it's a fang from the basilisk, isn't it?
That's what. That's what he's using that basilisk fang to destroy because as well. What I think cinematically is a really, really beautiful shot is the diary bleeds.
The diary
bleeds. It bleeds with the ink. It bleeds with the ink, but I think it's fantastically well done. And I think it's really, really done, really, really well. Ginny awakes. And essentially at that point they all managed to fly out using this fucking tiny pigeon because apparently Phoenix is I'm not gonna lie, that's one of the most scenes that irritates me the most. I understand that apparently Phoenixes are really strong and X, Y, and Z, but that's a small fucking bird and it's carrying three teenagers and a fully grown adult because Gilderoy's still down there. But they all managed to get back up. Behind the scenes, Hermione and all them are all waking up at this point because the mandrakes that again were planted, but they were talked about at the beginning, halfway through the film. They're using the juices from them to wake everyone up. And as all great action scenes, we have the follow-up scene of we have in Dumbledore's office. One of the last scenes. I actually think this is one of my favourite scenes throughout the whole films. Is the Dumbledore's office scene and a little bit after with Dobby. But in the actual Dumbledore scene, what we have is basically a conclusion to everything, an explanation of everything that's been going on.
Yeah,
the sword, and basically giving Harry a bit of a pep talk that he needed to really.
And also, Dumbledore, he tells Harry that, don't worry, I've sent a letter to Azkaban telling them to release Hagrid. Now, I'm pretty sure that's not how prisons work. That you can just send a head teacher can just send a letter to the biggest prison in the land and be like, "Oh, you know that guy? He works for me, so you just let him out now. It's fine. Yeah, we had an issue where we work, but you just let him out now." And then they're going to be like, "Yeah, cool, no worries." With the highest security prison around, just let him out.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you this. Hand on heart. My mum works in a prison in Yorkshire. And that won't go down. That would not happen. It won't happen at all in the slightest. If anyone wrote, this guy is good, let him out. I don't think that would go down. But apparently, Hogwarts and Azkaban are two different places, apparently.
So, Harry Potter 2 as a whole, then. Give me an overview. What do you think about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets?
Okay, for me, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, I think is one of the better films, and there's many reasons. And as an overall overview as well, one of the things I really do love about the Chamber of Secrets, because like I said, is that one of the last scenes as well is when, because we didn't actually touch on it as well, is Harry freeing Dobby.
Let's touch on that.
Let's touch because I think it's a brilliant moment. So this because as well scene. At this moment, Lucius has turned up saying his plans have been foiled and X, Y, and Z, and but so does Dobby. Because you then realise that Dobby's master is the Malfoy family. And Dobby's been going against his master to help Dobby. Now, the thing about in the law of House Elves, they're not allowed to leave unless their masters give them a piece of clothing. Because throughout all of this, Dobby the house elf's been wearing a tatty old pillowcase.
Mm-hmm.
So Harry, being the absolute, to be fair, I'll give him this. He was a gent in this one. He steals the diary just as a bit of a "I'm going to screw you over" moment, and has this confrontation with Lucius, which, by the way, where Lucius tries to murder him. Like, I didn't really pick up on this. He threw a spell, and obviously Dobby stopped the spell. But if you go back and watch it, it was the killing curse.
It was, yeah.
He tries to murder him, and I'm like, fuck me. Like, this is a bit harsh. Like, literally, that Dumbledore's just seen you two leave. When he finds a dead body, he'll know it's you. Like, I'm just saying. Dobby goes against his master, but again, he's still bound by these laws that he has. So Harry's like, look, you've forgotten something to Lucius, and gives him the diary that Lucius originally gave Ginny back in the bookshop.
Do you know what? All right, let me just touch on this. Again, I've got to admit it. I never noticed that. Like, the amount of times I've seen this, that and I read the book as well, I never noticed that he puts the book, because he takes the book off Ginny Weasley, and then he puts it back in her cauldron, but he must have put another one in. I never put two and two together all this time until watching it this time.
If you go back and watch it, if you go back and watch it as well, in the actual film, in the actual scene, it's so obvious because it's a small white book that he takes off of her, and then when it goes back in, it lands with a giant black leather-bound book.
Ah, right.
Now, when you're actually watching it for the first time, in your head, you'll go, oh, that book was there. It's just moving because the first one's put down, or your mind will tell you something.
Yeah.
But when you know the twist at the end, it's obvious that he puts two books back.
Yeah.
And when obviously the book then reappears throughout the book, throughout the series, throughout the story, you're like, oh yeah, it's that one. But yeah, that's so he's given this book right at the beginning to Ginny to manipulate her, to give Tom Riddle the ability to essentially groom her, which, if we're going down that route, it is. He's grooming this girl, and he, as a bit of a fuck you moment, Harry gives it him back to realize, look, I know what you did. I know this was all your fault.
Yeah.
Now, Lucius, being the Tory that he is, gives his scraps and says, look, fuck you, I don't want this, and gives it to to Dobby, his servant, his slave.
Yeah.
And they start walking off, and Harry says, open the book, and in there's a little sock, which is a piece of clothing, which he is being handed to by his employer, by Malfoy, which in the laws of the house elves means that he's a free elf.
Dobby is free.
Exactly. Because actually, I've gone the wrong way around actually here, but that's that point, now that he's a free elf, that's when Lucius then tries to kill him, and that's when Dobby can say no and go through that point. But for me, that's it. Just go back to this. Well, that scene is a brilliant scene for me, because I think it's a part. It's an element of the childness of the first two Harry Potter films and the first 1 to 3 Harry Potter books. Because for me, the first two Harry Potter films are very much, if you told me they were made by Disney, I'd believe you, because they're kids' family films. When the third one comes in, you start to get the Dementors. It's a bit of a teen film.
Yeah.
I'm not going to start saying to you that number 4 is rated 18 or anything like that. But when you start getting into the fourth one and moving forward, the fourth one is, I think, one of the first times that you start to actually witness someone a teenager be murdered by Lord Voldemort. And then I think the fifth one can be is quite a lot of backstory, so it can be quite confusing. So you've got to proper focus, and then going into the 6th, 7th, and 8th, that's when Harry's start to be a bit older. It starts dealing with your teenage romances and basically what ends in a war. So for me, the first two are Disney kids films, and I think that the Dobby element is a really nice, heartwarming moment. Harry's escaping from his family. It's nice and heartwarming. You have your little drama with a fucking giant snake. And I think that for me it's a really nice, essentially, end to Harry's, in air quotes, childhood. And I think that's a really nice, for me, it's what I really like about it.
Like, what's your overall thoughts of just number 2?
Just number 2, like I said, I think it's a really good, nice ending to Harry's childhood. I think it's a really still good introduction to the magical world. There's a lot of elements that it touched upon, weren't really needed, but just showed off that it's a magical world.
Yeah.
In all fairness, Aragog could have been an old man who told them that Hagrid were innocent, but no, they had to use a giant fucking spider.
And the talking spider.
A talking spider. The Polyjuice potion whole fiasco, which we talked about, wasn't even needed, but made the film fun. For me, it was one of the last films that was fun. Because the rest, even though they were great and they were fantastic and they were, amazing, they weren't.
Darker.
They were darker. They were. If you look at them, I think they're filmed in a different sepia tone. I think they're physically darker. So for me, it was a nice little way for Harry to be going into the kind of the more adult. I hate saying adult because it makes it sound like he's set up an OnlyFans, but you know what I mean. A bit more dark.
Can you imagine?
No, I really won't want to imagine that. But
get glasses off.
But for me, it's an overview of that one. It's a really good story progression. It's a really good introduction to the Weasley family, who become a lot more prominent later on. I think as a story, it's a really good, like we've talked about, seed setting. I think the first 3 books are a lot of seed setting for the remainders, but I think it's a really good element of that. And I just think it's a really nice. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's a really nice film. It's setting a lot of the rest of the story to be told.
And for me as well, it introduces a lot of stuff. Like it introduces the flying car, the concepts of a howler, the term mudblood. There's a lot of stuff that's introduced in this film. The fact that Harry's a parcel tongue, and that we're now starting to establish that Voldemort put a little bit of himself into Harry that fateful night. We're starting to establish a lot of stuff in this film, and we're getting a bit more progression on it. But yeah. Tell me about this. You got to tell me about this. So, how did the tattoo come about? Because you got
right. Yes. So to be fair, I've got it's a Deathly Hallows symbol. It's a Deathly Hallows symbol. Now, I would like to say it was on Harry Potter Comic Con, and it was all this or anything like that. No, it was so basically me and my best friend, we are Harry Potter heads. We're absolutely big, huge Harry Potter heads, and we got matching Deathly Hallows tattoos together because it was something that had brought us together. We'd watched and read all the films separately, became friends, and then we kind of bonded over that. Mine's on my foot. Hers on her wrist because I'm a Harry Potter head, but I'm not that much of a fucking Harry Potter head. I won't lie. But no, what is a really nice thing about, or not a really weird thing about Harry having the tattoo is, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're the only 2 people in the world with it. A lot of fucking people have it, right? But then you know that you've got a common denominator. You've got something to talk about. It was really weird. Like I was I've been having a bit of difficulties lately with my neighbour, and there's been a couple of us in the building who've had the same situation with the same neighbour, and we had a little impromptu meeting outside my flat the other day, and one of them came down, and she has. So it's the Deathly Hallows symbol, but then the word always, because obviously that's the Snape thing, which revealed much later on in the franchise. And it was weird that I was sat there and I was like, I now know an awful lot about this person, in the sense that I know that they love this franchise so much to get it on their skin. So even though for me, it's like, you can be like, oh yeah, but everyone's got that. Yeah, I do, but I now know a lot about that person. Because I think as well, if you're really into Harry Potter and you really appreciate it, there's a lot that you know about a person. Because like we were talking about earlier, that it introduces the topics of racism and stuff like that. If you're someone who's embracing Harry Potter, you kind of get to know about their own ethics and their own morals as well.
Yeah.
So
that's quite a nice story, actually. That's way nicer than what I was expecting. At first, when you was going down the whole, I'd love to say it was at a Comic-Con, and then I thought he was going to be like, but it was in Magaluf, just got a bit too pissed. I thought that's where you were going at first. But no, it turned out a really nice story.
No, it is a nice story, and don't get me wrong, I've got one of them tattoos from Magaluf, but it's not the Harry Potter one. No, it's because that's the thing is for me personally, it's not. I didn't get the tattoo for a love of Harry Potter. I'll be very honest with you. For me, it was because it was a friendship tattoo with my friend. But when I more think about it, it does bring a sense of something with a lot of people as well. When I was getting it done, the tattooist didn't know what the symbol was. So for him, it was like, he was like, oh, what actually is this? So when we were talking, it was quite funny because we were both getting them done. It was like, what is the symbol? And then we started talking about the franchise, and he was like, all right, I've seen one or two. And then we went off on one and we're talking about X, Y, and Z. And it's, for me, it's a conversation kind of, or a storytelling aspect of it, as well as what it is as well.
Definitely. I mean, I think a lot of tattoos are. So yeah, 100%. Like if there's something about you that is a good conversation start like that, I think that's a great thing to have. Right. So what do you think the legacy of Harry Potter is? Because like, I mean, let's boil it down to its very beginnings. It started off as a children's book, but it's become a cultural phenomenon. And then, obviously, in more recent times, J.K. Rowling has had like a lot of controversy, especially with the LGBT community. So that's really like sullied her name to a lot of people. But how do you see it? How do you see the legacy of Harry Potter?
My legacy of Harry Potter is believing. And it's as simple as that, because like I said, is when you're a kid and you've put the book down or you put the film off, you're believing that there's going to be an owl tapping at your window.
Yeah.
For Harry, he was believing that his life would get better, and it did. And he was believing that a lot of things would happen. He went through a lot of dark times to get to a nice. Because I think as well, it was 7 years that he dealt with the trials and tribulations that he did, and he got a lot of knockbacks because he didn't have a family, and then he found Sirius Black, and then he lost Sirius Black, and then there was a lot of tribulations that he went through, but he kept believing and got to what he needed to do. So then, in the epilogue that we got, he got a family, which is what he kind of always wanted, because even though he got fame and fortune thrust upon him, he didn't really want it. Whereas Ron, he kind of want, because I think at one point in the mirror of Harry said in the first film, he wanted to be on the Quidditch team, which he then got on the Quidditch team.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a lot of the characters had a sense of believing as well. I know it's a magical world, and I'm not trying to make the two alike, but the last film literally takes place during a war. Now, obviously, I was never alive during a war, so I can't really tell you what it's like. But a lot of that sort of what you're expecting these characters to go through is believing things will get better. And I think if you liken this to kind of J.K. Rowling's current controversy, now I'm not going to get too much into the rightness or wrongness of what she's trying to say, because I think we could be here for hours, and I think that's a whole separate sort of issue. But for the people part of that community, they found a sense of community and they believed things will get better. They then fell short. They then had someone who'd led them the way. They had a sense of, well, their leaders, was I led down the wrong garden path?
Yeah.
And the thing is, the thing that they then found, which was the Harry Potter thing, that's going to help people like that believe that things can get better. Now, like I said, I'm a straight white guy who's not had the sort of tribulations that a lot of people do have. So my argument of things can get better with a boy wizard I could say working, but I know it has helped a lot of people believe things can get better. And yes, he has a magic wand, but they've had a lot of people had to go through a lot of strength to get through things. And if it meant sitting down for 2 hours and just letting the world go by whilst it did, it made things a little bit easier. So for me, the legacy, that even though it's maybe been tarnished in recent months, it's all been about believing things just can just get a little bit better. Yeah, maybe not at the end of a wand, but if you believe it, you can get better.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very well put, and I think that a lot with all kinds of media, we all consume it differently. We all do see things differently, but I think that's a very fair point which you put across there. To be honest with you, and like from my point of view, like the legacy of Harry Potter, I always think like, because I mean I'm 32, so I think like we're in the same ballpark age wise, and I kind of feel like we kind of grew up with Harry Potter, didn't we? So we kind of we started off as those like young kids, like where they establish it in the first book, and we had that escapism through him, where that he got a better life, and he got a better life very quickly. But he had much greater trials and tribulations. Someone murdered his parents. Every year they're coming back to try and murder him. He gets his godfather or whatever it is that Sirius Black is, and then he ends up being murdered as well. Then everyone who he loves, everyone who he's close to, dies. But he comes out at the end of it in a much better situation than how we started it. So even though he's had all these trials and tribulations, and again, I think that's a very nice point that you made, that like things can get better, because we've kind of gone on that journey with Harry Potter, where
I couldn't agree more.
Life is difficult at times, but then if you just keep on going and keep making the right decisions, then you get to a good point.
Exactly. I think for me, to kind of hit the nail on the head with the point that you're making, that you end up being somewhere better than you started. And I really, I don't know if you've seen this because it actually never made the final cut. There's a deleted scene from one of the, I think it's Hallow's Part 1 or 2, and it's a conversation between Harry and his Aunt Petunia. Because if
Right.
it must be the first scene, the first film, sorry, because obviously because the war's about to kick off, and because when he turns 17, he's no longer protected.
Yeah.
They're at risk. He has to move them out. There's a scene where they're all moving out, but Petunia's looking around the house, and he's there, and she throughout these 7 books and 7 films, 8 films, the Dursleys have been horrible. We've all
Yeah.
hated them. We've never liked them. And in this particular scene, she says, she goes, "You lost your mum that night, but you never knew her. I lost my sister. And I
Yeah.
then got thrust into a magical world that I didn't want to be part of. I didn't want this. I now have to give everything up because of this." And it was a really vulnerable moment that Harry himself has been such an angry person towards these people. And he's then seeing, he's growing and going, all right, okay. And it for me, it kind of hits now when you mentioned in there how he started this whole journey of his magical journey, if you want to put it, hating these people because they prevented him from doing what he wanted to do. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say they were nice people because they fucking put him in a cupboard. Like they
Yeah.
were literal horrible people. But when he was coming to a point where he was becoming a young man, he was now looking at things because for me, it really hit the nail on the head where he's been missing his parents, but he never met his parents. He can't miss someone you don't really know. He just didn't know
Mm.
them. Whereas this woman, yes, she was a vile woman, but she did lose her sister. And she
Yeah.
lost her sister as an adult. So she literally had 20, 30 years with this person. And you never saw that vulnerability. And then at that point, you start realizing the development that everyone's gone through. And for
Mm.
me, that hit the note when you mentioned it there is the legacy of it is, yeah, it start being somewhere different to where you started, but I kind of believe in things that can get better. And I think for me, that was a nail on the head on that one.
Definitely. Which one then? Which one's your favourite then out of all 7? Or if you want to talk about it in terms of films out of all 8, but which one is your favourite?
My favorite one, I won't lie, and the only reason why there's okay, I've got a favorite book and a favorite film, and they are separate. They're 2 different ones. Favorite book is Prisoner of Azkaban, and the main
Mm.
reason is, and the only reason it is time travel. I love time travel. So the element of
Right.
them
Okay.
of playing with the time turners, I love it, and I think it's a really clever narrative device that they did, and I think they played with it really, really well. And that's one of the main, excuse me, I think the main reason why I love it. When it comes to films, one of my actual favorite films, I think they're all kind of on par. Except, to be fair, I wasn't a huge fan of Order of the Phoenix because I think Order of the Phoenix was quite a difficult one to make into a film because the book is primarily just backstory, and I think that was quite hard
Yeah.
to do. But one of my favorite parts of the films is the last film, and it's the Battle of Hogwarts. I love them all action sequences and the destruction of the school. I thought was such a metaphoric thing of essentially all
Yeah.
coming of his innocence, because school's quite an innocent thing of it all coming and being destroyed,
Sure.
and I thought it was cinematically done beautifully because as well, like I said, is like I said, I mean, I'm 28, so we're not the same age, but we'd have gone to school together. We're in the same sort of age bracket.
Yeah.
We've not lived through a war. We've not done through anything sort of this. But for that element where you're going into a school and you're of school age and you're fighting in a war, because let's fucking face it, they have no other choice. It was for me a lot of determination, and it was. I just think it's cinematically done brilliantly. So for me, it's Order of the Phoenix, Prisoner of Azkaban for the book for time travel element, and then the last one just for the Battle of Hogwarts. I think was done brilliantly.
Nice one. So, final question: Harry
Yes,
Potter, Chamber of Secrets. What score would you give it out of 10?
I think if if we're talking films, I won't lie. I think it's gonna go quite low. Main reason, if as out of 10 on its own thing, it's easily like a 6 or a 7
Yeah,
because I think it's plants
I'd
a lot.
agree.
It does really, really well. It's fun. It does what it needs to do. It's told really well. Visually, it's done really well. Book wise, I'd probably still say quite high because it's planting them seeds. You've
Hmm.
basically been told you've been told everything about a Horcrux that doesn't get mentioned for another 4 books.
Yeah.
And it's these sort of elements, and I love them as a storyteller. I love them that you don't. I mean, bring it back to what we both do, which is comedy. You think about it this way: they're the biggest callbacks.
Yeah.
That's literally what it is. It's a giant callback, and I think they're done brilliantly. And I can't fault them. So for me, we'll look at. I'd probably say I'll go on the. I am feeling a good mood today. I'll probably say about a 7. If you're talking about in terms of ranks within the actual franchises, it is quite low, because if you think about it in terms of comedy, callbacks are great, but your biggest laugh is when you do the call back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So for me, they are very good, but when you actually get that moment of clarity and you go, oh my God, that's amazing, that's when you're getting into your 8s, your 9s, and your 10s.
Very well put. And I agree with you. I would go, in terms of a film, I'd go about 6 or a 7. But in terms of a book, I'll be honest with you, I've got to go about a 9, because this is the first book I ever read of my own volition.
Right. Okay.
And because of that, it holds a place near and dear to my heart. But obviously, because of that, I went on to read all the rest of them. And I couldn't wait for them to come out, and hearing spoilers in school and all that stuff. But yeah, I think today we've gone on a right old journey. I think this may be the longest one I've done yet. So I think we can leave it there, Jack. Thank you very, very much for joining me today. But before you go, is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to put out there?
So if anyone wants to find myself, I'm on all the social medias, which is I am Jack V. Now that comedy is slow, I don't know when this is coming back, but now comedy is slowly coming back. My comedy club, which is the Jacko Club's comedy club, you can find where we're popping up now and then. And I also, because what else does a white guy do in lockdown? We create podcasts. No offense, Adam, but it's what we fucking do. But yes, me and fellow comedian Nick Crooks, we're not as organized as you, in the sense that we have a theme. We literally just press record for an hour and talk some shit with some people, which weirdly enough, I am about to start recording in 9 minutes as well. So this is ended perfectly timed. We are the Nice Guys of Comedy Podcast, because we're really original with a name. So if you find us on Facebook and Instagram and all them sort of places at NGOC Pod, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, all that sort of thing. But yeah, there you can find me.
There you go. Perfect. So, Jack, thanks once again for joining me. Everyone, go check him out on all those platforms, and I'm going to go let you go and record in 9 more minutes' time. So, yeah, cheers coming on, mate.
No, cheers coming on. In actual fact, I'm not going to lie, my day off tomorrow, I think I'm actually going to watch Harry Potter now. I had no intention of doing this, but now I freaking want to really watch Harry Potter. So thank you for letting me experience my own nerdiness, because it's been a while that I've had this opportunity.
No worries. I'll speak to you soon, mate.
Speak to you soon, mate.